NFL Divisional Round DFS. I am Adam Zdroik, joined by Ryan Belongia. We are talking the 4-gamer coming up this weekend. If you're playing the 2-gamer Saturday, 2-gamer Sunday, rotowire.com. Ryan has a couple articles up, but Sim Building Master Ryan, welcome into the show.
Yeah, thanks. We'll have an article up broke it down into the 2-game slate for each day. So an article for Saturday's 2-gamer, an article for Sunday's 2-gamer. DraftKings will have contests for both those, but we're going to talk about the 4-gamer on here. There's some big contests for that. I think it's more interesting. It's an interesting slate overall. Give like a brief breakdown of the games and the overview. 3 of the games are rematches. So the Bills and the Ravens, the last game on the slate, Sunday night, Sunday afternoon, marquee game of the slate. The Ravens crushed the Bills 35-10 when they played earlier in the season. I don't know how much you want to look into that, but Derrick Henry was unstoppable, rushed for 200 yards. So, yeah, that's interesting. The Ravens are road favorites there, so people are putting some weight into that. That game could go a lot of different ways. Then you have the Eagles-Rams. Teams played less than a couple months ago. Saquon rushed for like 250 some yards in that game. That was a primetime game. Yeah, 255 yards. That was a Monday night game or Sunday night or one of those. And the Eagles handled the Rams. KC and Houston met a couple weeks ago. Houston couldn't really do much. KC was dominant from the start. I think Houston scored a late touchdown to lose by 8. But yeah, Mahomes kind of did whatever he wanted there. Houston looked pretty inept on offense. So you see a big spread in that game, big spread in the Eagles game, and then the Lions-Commanders game. 55.5 point total. I believe it's the highest total we've seen all season. The Lions have a 32 point implied total, which is the highest any team's had all season. And DraftKings, it's pretty lame, I think, but the pricing is soft for most of the slate, especially on the Lions. So they have the biggest total they've had all season, and Amon-Ra is the cheapest he's been all season. Montgomery's the cheapest he's been all season. Now that's because of injury, but Laporta's really cheap. Goff's cheap. And then even like Patrick Mahomes all the way down to 6K. We've never seen him that low. Kelsey all the way down to 5K. Never seen him that low. So you got a bunch of guys on the Chiefs and the Lions that are priced cheaper than they've been all season. So really soft pricing there. Hurts is the cheapest he's been. So I think it's going to be hard to avoid Lions, just given the spot. It's a great spot. So for cash games and like small field stuff, you're going to want to have multiple Lions. Like Amon-Ra is close to a lock in that stuff. Gibbs too, we'll talk about. I don't know. That's like a quick breakdown. We'll get into more of the games, but I think the chalk is going to be relatively easy to identify.
Yeah, you just look at the best players and go from there. Look at the highest totals. It's not too difficult, especially when there's 4 games, different than the 6 games we had last week. Obviously, different than 10+ games on a regular week. There's only so many options you can play. One thing did catch my ear. You said the Chiefs kind of dominated the Texans. That was a tie game before Tank Dell had his touchdown, or when Tank Dell got his touchdown injury. It was 17-16. They missed the extra point, but it was basically a tie game after Tank Dell went down. 3 plays 1 yard, 14 plays 50 yards, 3 plays negative 13 yards. Those are the next 3 drives for the Texans without Tank Dell. So I wanted to point that out there, that it seemed like if you're just looking at the numbers, it was a pretty even game until that injury. Yeah, Tank Dell 6 for 98 in that game with that touchdown. I think that needs to be pointed out here because he's obviously not playing in this one. So.
Yeah, and the Texans looked a little bit better last week. Stroud looked better. The defense looked pretty good. The defense has been good all season.
If people listened to the show last week, I was like, the only team not to score 30 points is going to be the Texans. And then, if I'm being honest, they were okay. They got a lot of their numbers in the fourth quarter when they're just milking their lead. Herbert threw four interceptions. They should have been losing in the first half. They ended up getting bailed out a little bit on a late call. Ended up going down for a touchdown to get a lead in the first half, but they did look good. I'll say that. But
At least to how they've been playing.
yeah,
They weren't great by any means. Yeah, like you said, LA or gave them a few things, but they were better than they've been.
yeah, we'll probably get into some of our feelings in that game, but weather-wise, we do have some things to discuss outside of the Lions game. So the Chiefs Texans game, it should be okay. It's just low temperatures. Basically, all these games are going to be low temperatures. It's cold everywhere across the United States. Low temperatures. I'm not seeing any precipitation there, so that should be okay. Just cold. Last I'm seeing right now for this Eagles Rams game is that there could be snow coming, so that is something to monitor as we get closer because that is a Sunday game. So we're talking Friday. That is a couple more days away. So there's possible that snow. It's already going to be cold, and then this Bills one will be. Is it going to be below 10 degrees? It'll be close to 10 degrees. Chance for snow doesn't. It's a little less likely, I think, than the Eagles game. So just a couple things to keep an eye out for. Did you see anything else that I missed?
No,
there?
but I think that's pretty important to bring up. I mean, it just
Yeah.
makes the Detroit game look even better. Like really everything points to that game. The Buffalo Baltimore game, frigid temperatures there. And yeah, we'll see about the other games. Cold in Philly too, maybe snow. I mean, yeah, you don't feel optimistic about the passing games in those spots. I don't know that I did in the first place. It's Derrick Henry and Saquon. Like it almost amplifies the spots for those guys, and consequently, like the passing game spots for the Lions and the Commanders. It seems hard to like avoid going that route, but like everybody's going to do it for the most part. So at least in tournaments, there'll be some good opportunities for leverage.
Yeah, let's get into quarterbacks here. You kind of mentioned it, Goff and Jaden Daniels, 22 points. Didn't do as much as I wanted him to do last week. But so this matchup, I think you mentioned it, and it's kind of makes sense to focus there because of the weather in these other places. But the Commanders kind of did this last week where this grinded out. The situation where this is a grinded out game. Washington doesn't want their defense on the field. If they can continue to, convert third downs and kind of thing and makes this a short game, not as many points as what this almost ridiculous 55.5 over under is for a playoff game. Do you think, you said it right there, that's probably going to be popular, that people will go to Daniels, will go to Goff, when we look at it the other way where maybe it's these running games that are getting more. I'm sure Daniels is going to get some of these runs, but I feel like the Lions could just control this game with Montgomery back. You get Montgomery and Gibbs back together. Do we really want to play Goff here? And do you want to play Daniels if this is a blowout from the start? So I think there's plenty of reasons not to take these guys, even though it is in a dome. But
yeah, no, some good points, especially the Lions blowout script. There are definitely ways that Goff and the pass catchers can fail. Like you said, these running backs Montgomery back now. I mean, Washington hasn't been very good. They ran pretty hot against Tampa, converting every third and fourth down, picking up some big penalties. That grinded out script you're talking about, the Lions are tougher to do that against. I mean, I don't really think they have any hope of stopping the Lions offense. So I think it's going to be a good spot for Daniels, like no matter what, especially in the second half, facing a negative game script. Like he should rush for a bunch of yards here. And if he can throw for some touchdowns, put up a big score. But, I don't think he's a must or anything. You could go to Goff. I think for cash games, you're looking at three guys, though. Daniels and Goff in that game, and then Mahomes at 6K if you want the extra savings. 6K is wild for Mahomes. I know it's not the greatest spot, Houston's D is pretty good, and they're pricing him, with the other games on the slate in mind. So, he's got to be cheaper than the Commanders and Lions quarterbacks. But I don't mind going there either. Mahomes runs a little bit more in the playoffs. He seems pretty safe for 6K. And like there's some risk to Goff. Like you said, there's some risk to Daniels too. But like all three guys project really well. They're all just too cheap in a vacuum. If this was a 10-game slate, any of them would be good plays. The Lions, we'll get to Amon-Ra. If this was a 12-game slate, people would be calling him a lock. So what is he going to be on a 2-game slate? But yeah, for the quarterbacks, I don't know. I think Daniels, Goff, Mahomes, kind of take your pick.
Full fade, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen.
No, I wouldn't say that. I think both are in play. I mean, I lean a little bit more towards Allen. He just runs for more touchdowns now than Lamar, now that they have Derrick Henry. It's weird to say, but I almost feel like the rushing upside with when you put touchdowns in there is more in Allen's favor. And, you would hope for like a trailing script for the Bills and an Allen Superman game, which we've seen plenty of times. It could go the other way, but I think I would be more likely to play Allen. I think Lamar, it's tougher for him to pay off his price tag here. I mean, unless they go behind. They go behind 2 scores, and then you get Lamar chasing, which is always good. But, if the Ravens have it their way, they'll run the ball and control the clock. And Lamar's been running more. There hasn't been a ton of passing attempts for the Ravens, but they might need it here. I mean, this game could shoot out.
It could. It's implied in the point total and the over under, and that the spread has gone kind of around that 1 point area there for both teams. Yeah, though it does seem like, as kind of what you mentioned with Mahomes, you're getting almost a $2,000 savings with Mahomes. And if you figure, we look at his history of he just runs more in the playoffs when needed, and the Texans have a good defensive line. So, if they're getting to him, kind of like they got to Herbert, you'll see Mahomes rushing a little more than he has over the regular season. So, you're looking, okay, maybe Mahomes gets to the 20, 25 point range. How many more points? Is Allen actually going to have one of his 50-point games? Probably not. Is Lamar going to be that much higher than 30 points? Probably not. So it just kind of makes sense to look at Mahomes just because he's cheaper than these guys. So that's...
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you said running a little bit more. I think across the board, these quarterbacks are going to be running a little bit more. We saw it last week, and I think we'll continue to see it. Bo Nix had a ton of rushing yards. Jackson had 15 attempts for 80-some yards. It was just a part of the game plan to have Lamar running the ball.
that was my main talking point last week.
Yeah. And you were right.
Except Daniels didn't hit his over, unfortunately.
Yeah, a little, but that was unfortunate. Most of the time you're going to get Washington playing from behind there. He did have 13 attempts, just didn't bust anything big. But yeah, I think QBs are going to be running.
Yeah, and the other end of that, you still have contrarian plays of, again, we don't have to say why Allen and Jackson can be good if they're less popular than some of these other guys, because, as Ryan said, It could be a high-scoring game. It could be both these guys. Maybe Henry doesn't get the 3 touchdowns and Lamar gets 3 and a couple passing. Same with Josh Allen. Both these guys are in play for 5+ touchdowns if this is a high-scoring game. So,
and the other thing is, because there's soft pricing at other positions, you can just afford it if you make one fade at a certain position. So there are scenarios where 28 points is going to be good enough from one of them when the others score 22. And there's enough value to just make that construction if you fade I don't know, Saquon or Puka or an expensive tight end or so those guys are still in consideration just for raw points. If you think you have enough value at the other spots, maybe you're going to gamble on David Montgomery and then you can afford to spend up the quarterback.
You're fully out on Jared Goff then?
No.
Sorry, Jalen Hurts. I did not mean Goff. Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think like for cash games, I'm out and that. But for like leverage in tournaments, no one playing Hurts when he's this cheap is interesting. We've still seen ceiling games from Hurts. Like he still has games where he rushes for 2 touchdowns. He rushed for a ton of TDs this year. It's just been Saquon recently. Yeah, I don't know. The Rams are good too. Stafford looked great last week. There is scenarios where the Eagles go down and you need Hurts to chase the game. I don't mind that for tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's just another running
Saquon's going to be
quarterback.
popular too. Yeah, you could fade Saquon. You play Hurts with Puka and one of his pass catchers. That's a ton of leverage there.
Saquon gets 2 50-yard runs down to the 1-yard line. Hurts gets the 2 touchdowns.
There you go.
Just building it out right there. Hurts still with more points than Barkley in that situation. But yeah, I mean, 4 games, it's kind of it at quarterback. Just you got to make your decision if you want to pay up, or if you, I guess the decision in cash games would be Mahomes or Goff. I would say I personally would be on Mahomes, but you're probably, I assume you're on Goff. I just think the Lions are kind of going to focus on the ground game a little more here.
I haven't decided yet. Daniels is in consideration too.
Okay.
The 2 places I've checked have Daniels as the most popular. Like I see those 3 as the 3 quarterbacks over 20%. So you are looking at those 3, but I think people might feel safer with Daniels rushing floor in cash games. Yeah, because Goff, like you said, Goff, what if they just blow them out and Goff throws for like 200 yards and a touchdown? I mean,
we saw it in the Titans game, I think it was earlier this year, where I don't know what he had, but it's
happened a couple times.
Yeah, 15 points. He ended up with 85 passing yards and 3 touchdowns because they got out to such an early lead. This is against a terrible team in the middle of the season. It wasn't the playoffs, but it's not like Washington has a good defense. So this could be 20. It could be 21-0 in the first quarter more than the other games, I guess I'll say.
Yeah. I'll downplay that a little with the Lions. The Lions are one of those teams that keep their foot on the pedal. Dan Campbell, he'll still be trying to score points, like even if they're up, until they're up like 28, 30 points. So yeah, still some risk, but
yeah, there'd be scoring points with Craig Reynolds.
It's possible.
Speaking of running backs, Barkley 8,200, Henry 8,000, Gibbs 7,700. 3 guys right at the top of the list. We got a question here with Gibbs and Montgomery returning. Gibbs formerly was, without Montgomery in the lineup, you lock him in, he's getting 20 plus touches guaranteed. Pretty much dominant. We saw him in that Vikings game, how good he could be. But now you throw Montgomery in, he's basically been training, he's been in practice all week here, so he's going to be in play for some carries. I mentioned Craig Reynolds there. You look at his amount of carries, he got 4 carries, 7 carries, 8 carries. We saw throughout the season, throughout the last couple of years, Montgomery, I guess it just depends on his health here. Are you willing to go with Gibbs here at 7,700 when Montgomery is known to be a touchdown thief, is known to, when healthy, have more touches than Gibbs? So that is the question here. Montgomery's 5,700, Gibbs is 7,700. Just in terms of Gibbs compared to the high-end guys, what are your thoughts on that situation?
I think Gibbs is pretty much a no-brainer still at this point. Especially for like cash games and single entry stuff. He's just been way too good. And Montgomery, it's hard to envision him coming back and stealing too much work. Like I think he's going to play. He'll get some short yardage stuff. He'll be in there for pass protection stuff, pass blocking stuff. You can play both of them if you want to. But the other thing is it's a 32-point total. Maybe if they were playing in Philadelphia in conditions with a 22-point total or, whatever it would be, then you consider that with Montgomery back. But Gibbs has just been way too good. It just doesn't matter. I mean, the game log is ridiculous. 49 against the Vikings last time out, 4 touchdowns. I mean, he had over 28 and 4 straight. I know that coincides with Montgomery being out, but the matchup's just so good. So, yeah, pretty much a no-brainer. I think after that, people will be deciding between either spending up for Saquon or going down to Montgomery. I think Derrick Henry will be more of like a tournament consideration. People just feel better about Saquon because he at least catches a few passes. I think they feel better about the matchup too. So like for cash games, I think people will consider Saquon and not Henry. And then Montgomery, yeah, that's a talking point. I don't know. I said in my article that I hate what they did with the pricing. They should have given us more of a decision. Like Montgomery was 7K in his last game, and now he's 5,700. He was never below 6K all year. So, I mean, him and Gibbs can both get there. We saw him and Gibbs get there together almost every game they played this season. I forget the streak, but it was like 10 games in a row where they each had over 15 fantasy points. And this game has a higher total than all those other games. So why wouldn't they do it again? Like, I feel pretty comfortable just playing both of them.
It's pretty bold.
But, if I don't have that right now for the 4-game slate, on the 2-game slate, I'm playing both of them. 4-game slate, I think there's the value to get up to Saquon. That's what I have right now. But I don't know. Like, it depends. It depends what you do at receiver. I guess the decision right now, I think most people will face, the one I'm facing is, do you pay up for Saquon or Puka? Because it's tough to play both. That's the decision I'm thinking about. Other running backs that'll get consideration, Kyren is in there. He's in the middle of both those guys. Without Blake Corum there now, negative script, he'll probably have to catch some passes too. We saw him more involved in the passing game last week, and he's a little bit cheaper than he's been too. So I understand if people would want to go to Kyren. But yeah, I think that's all you're really considering for cash games. Other guys are tournament plays like Henry, Mixon, Cook, anyone else like Austin Eckler. I don't know. What do you think about the running back position?
Yeah, there's not too much. We mentioned, I think I mentioned Austin Eckler last week. Didn't really come through, but he was coming off an injury. And this one figures to be more of a play from behind the entire way, which is always more favorable for Eckler. I think he had that key reception on the last drive, actually, if I remember that Bucs game correctly. But you figure he'll probably be in a little healthier, a little better game script for him personally, as mostly a passing down back. But yeah, I mean, you look through the list, it's like, what else are you going to do here? I guess you're not going to do Pacheco, Brian Robinson. There's not really anything else, and then you're getting into backups kind of thing. Mixon at 6,500. Like, what's the point of Mixon here when Montgomery's there, when Cook's there? Mixon, sure, for tournaments, but I honestly can't see that one. But again, I said that the Texans weren't getting 30 points last week, so what do I know? But it doesn't really make
I
sense.
agree with you, though. Mixon, really fortunate to get there last week. He was massive chalk in that game at 7,200 and was busting until that sort of wild touchdown run at the end. I agree. We can move on to receiver. I did find a lineup that you can play both Barkley and Nakua, but you have to fade some of these value receivers. Receivers tough. I think St. Brown is. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, one of my initial lineups had Lamar, Henry, and Barkley in it. So you can find guys. I'm not saying they're good, but you can find guys.
They are good, actually. They're decent. The problem is there's opportunity cost. So you have to fade like Amon-Ra, which he doesn't necessarily get there all the time, especially in blowouts. Puka as well. He didn't get there last week in a better spot, and this is a tough matchup. So yeah, you're not going to be surprised if either of those guys bust. Starting at the top, no one's really going to play Nico Collins or AJ Brown. Those guys will be overlooked. So, consider them in tournaments if you want to. They'd be good leverage, especially in like the really big field tournaments. The popular receivers are going to be Amon-Ra, Puka, McLaurin. Just for all the reasons we've mentioned. I mean, Amon-Ra is just too cheap. So I think he's probably a lock for cash games. I mean, he'd never been below 7,700. We're used to him in the 8Ks. So I don't know why they did this. It's really annoying.
He's been below 8K for 5 straight weeks. Granted, it's high 7K, but
yeah, sure. But you're right. But like, why is he the cheapest he's ever been in the on paper the best spot that Detroit's had? So yeah, I don't know. I think you just play him in cash games.
I think it's just taken. I mean, you just look at the numbers. 6 of the last 7, he's been below 20 points. He had a bunch of 10, 12, 12. I mean, he has the Bills game, which was 42-48 game, which is
his targets are down. You're right. His targets are down. There's a lot of mouths to feed there in Detroit.
Yeah, Laporta's been getting more looks, so that's kind of taken away.
Jameson Williams too.
Yeah. So.
Yep. No, you're right. And that game against the Bills where he saw those targets, that's because they were down like 20-some points in the second quarter, and they just played catch up the whole way. So you're right. Yeah. Still, though, it's easy to see why he projects the best. McLaurin, yeah, kind of the same thing. It's about as good of a spot as it could be on paper for McLaurin, I think. Detroit's defense gave up the most receiving yards in the league to wide receivers this season, and the second most catches. Just traditionally a great spot, and they're banged up and they're playing inside. So, or the defense is banged up and the game's indoors. So I think on paper, it's as good a spot for Washington pass catchers as you can have. And that includes McLaurin. He's been seeing double-digit targets, 2 good games in a row. Clearly,
do you believe in McLaurin? You're giving the numbers out.
I've seen some. Sense. Okay, this is what I'll say. I've seen some stats. What do you mean? But I kind of do. Okay. I've seen some stats that like show that he hasn't been that good, just as far as like getting open and like that kind of stuff, like ranking near the separation, those type of metrics. But I don't know, man. When I see him out there, he's always catching deep balls. He's great at contested catches. I mean, I don't know. I think it's a pretty good spot for him. I'm still into it, and like Daniels like locks onto him. Like I don't know. So if you get I don't know. I think it's about as good as a spot it can be for Washington receivers.
Yeah, I just want to say personally, like I'm in a season-long fantasy league. You get bonus points for 100 yards, and like his numbers look really good on the season. But it seemed like he was always getting a ton of targets, but he was like 60, 70 yards. He was always below that bonus marker. And then a lot of these games, it felt like, okay, he gets like a fourth quarter touchdown. It's like, oh, okay, he saves his point total in the fourth quarter. It just seemed like that was happening way too often for how good his overall numbers are. But I guess that just shows he's consistent at least.
I know what you're saying. I'm not really sure it's his fault. Like sometimes with QBs like Daniels and Hurts or
I'm not suggesting
you know what I'm talking about. Right, yeah. Like they don't throw for a lot of yards. Sometimes they just throw to everybody. Sometimes they're running more. Like especially like I don't. It's going to be inconsistent with guys like that, but still feel good about taking a chance on him.
Yeah, he just has some really bad games. I guess is kind of what I'm referring to, where he had, I think 5 games he had less than 20 yards, which that's
there were some weird games for them for him and for the Commanders this season.
Yeah. And I guess that's what you get with the rookie quarterback. But that's just one of the questions I have with McLaurin's here. He's supposed to be one of the most popular ones. His price makes sense. But why does he have these random games?
Yeah, no, another guy that's fadeable. You don't need to play any of these guys. You can spend up at every position and play value wide receivers. So going down the list, Jameson Williams is there. We've seen the ceiling this guy has. 24.5, 29 in 2 of the last 3. He's gone over 25, I think 5 times this season. Just we see him catch these deep touchdowns, have multiple touchdown games. So I think that's a great option for tournaments. It looks like Zay Flowers is going to be out. So you could go to Bateman again if you're playing Lamar. I don't think people are really going to be targeting the pass catchers in that game. except Shakir. Shakir's going to be kind of popular actually for 5K. He was popular last week for 5,300 against Denver. He's pretty much the only receiver on Buffalo you can like feel somewhat safe about playing.
Should Shakir be popular?
Yeah.
You said this last week, and it's like this guy is like, okay, 5 for 50 yards, and you're hoping for a touchdown. And now with like Keon Coleman's healthy, Amari Cooper's healthy, it just seems like why are we playing Shakir right here when there's just other guys in this range who have more upside? I mean, Xavier Worthy's sitting here at 5,200.
I tend to agree, Adam. I did not play him last week. I much prefer Xavier Worthy this week. I was going to get to those two Chiefs. I think they're the best value, Worthy and Hollywood Brown. I think they'll be the most popular. So, well, Shakir is going to be right there with them. People feel good about playing Shakir. He's pretty like when he's out there, he gets targets. He played 53% of the snaps last week. But I don't know. He's the only guy that Allen consistently looks to. I agree though. Like him getting a touchdown seems like a tall order compared to these other guys.
I would just like to know his numbers when Cooper and Coleman are also out there. And I mean that's even saying, okay, Cooper, like who knows how much of the playbook he knows at this point. So I mean, there's some early games in there.
I think I know what you're saying, but I think he has at least 6 targets in 12 straight games. So like,
yeah, and he's had more than 60 yards and like.
No, I hear you. Yeah, he's 5K though. So like, if he gives you 6, he's supposed to give you 5 for 50, 6 for 60. That's what 5K players do. That's what he did last week, and it was optimal. Because people tried everybody else in that range and nobody got there. McMillan busted. I forget all the other players. But then you have Shakir, just steady Eddie, 6 for 60, all you need. This week,
don't you want Worthy 7 for 70 and touches in the red zone?
Yeah, I love Worthy. He's my favorite value one of my favorite receivers on this slate. My favorite value on this slate, I think he's going to go a bit overlooked because of all these other guys we talked about. Not overlooked. Overlooked is the wrong word. He's going to be popular, but not as popular as he should be because Hollywood Brown's there too for 1K cheaper. People love Hollywood Brown and they love to try to save 1,000. I'm not saying that's a bad move. I like Hollywood Brown here too.
I mean, if people love Shakir, then they definitely love Hollywood Brown, who has basically been 5 for 50 himself in the 2 games he's played.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's tough decisions. Like people love a lot of guys on this slate. They love Puka and St. Brown too. I mean, these are like, we have the best teams here. So, there's a lot of options and a lot of good options. Makes sense.
It makes sense.
I mean, look at like guys you're not even talking about. Like, how wild is it that Cooper Kupp is 5,400?
He just hasn't done anything. I mean, he's barely getting looks. I mean, he's out there.
Barely getting looks.
He's out there in all these snaps, but I mean, you're watching the game last week. He's there to block, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, last week he got scripted out of it. So did Puka. Even it was just kind of like domination from the start. He got the catches.
In the first half.
Just like still a guy that you can consider for tournaments at this price. I think 5,400 is wild. People played him last week for 64. He was 1K cheaper.
Would you rather play Devonta Smith for 5,600?
Yeah, I think, like in a vacuum, but he'll also be more popular. Just like giving people options. If I was playing against myself to try to score the most points.
I mean, how much more popular? Like 5%? He's not going to be that much more popular.
A lot. I think a lot. Let me see.
But your guy Shakir is sitting here at 5K, so Shakir is going to get a lot of that.
What's going to happen is they're all going to end up like. Do you want me to like read off what I have?
Yeah,
I have Hollywood Brown. I have Hollywood Brown around like 45%, 40-ish% because he's the cheapest. Then like all these guys right around 35. Puka, Shakir, Amon-Ra, Worthy, McLaurin. How many? 5 guys. All 5 of those guys will be like in the 30% to 40% range. Puka, Amon-Ra, Shakir, Worthy, McLaurin. And then right under that is Devonta Smith around like 20. Let's see, where's Cup? I see Cup around like 5. So Devontae Smith around 20-ish%, Cup around like 5-ish%. If you want to take a chance, I mean, I don't know. I don't feel when I was talking about McLaurin, like when I was seeing stats about McLaurin, like advanced stats, Cup was the worst on all those. Like separation, getting open, down the field, just like everything. Like, so maybe it makes sense as to why he's not seeing targets.
He looks slow out there. He's probably not 100%.
I think it would make sense. The numbers would back that up.
Yeah, his poor numbers in the last 4 games kind of coincide with Stafford's mostly poor numbers in the last 4 games. So
it makes sense too to want to get the ball to Puka every chance you have.
Yeah. Otherwise, Zacchaeus 4,300. Just a few guys that were popping out. Dotson got a touchdown last game. I'm not going to recommend him, but Keon Coleman is down here 4,100. Mentioned Cooper. Cooper is 4,400. So I honestly think those guys are more likely for a touchdown than Shakir. I know Shakir is a possession guy. What does he have this season? 4 touchdowns?
I think you're right.
Something like that. So I just think those guys get more looks in the red zone. So like, why are we paying up for Shakir?
Nope, I agree. I think Shakir is not a tournament play for me, unless I was pairing him with Allen and hoping for the touchdown, but more of just a cash game consideration if you feel good about him. I don't know. Some people really like playing Shakir. I'm not going to talk him off it when he's only 5K. Like it might be a pretty good spot for Bills pass catchers. They don't get a lot of trailing scripts, and they might get one here. And like Shakir would be the guy for those quick targets, quick catches.
One other guy.
He's a good play. I have a few other. I have a couple punts.
Okay, I was just gonna say De'Ami Brown, and then
that's my favorite one.
Okay.
Yeah, really like De'Ami Brown. Him and Zacchaeus are like splitting equally in the number 2 wide receiver. I mean, they're both out there about 65% of snaps. But De'Ami Brown just looked great. He's a deep threat. I think Zacchaeus is like the smaller, more possession guy. De'Ami can kind of do it in different ways. They get him different targets. And yeah, he's a deep threat. So yeah, I thought he looked pretty good. And if you're not going to play McLaurin, it's a great spot for De'Ami, Zacchaeus. The last guy worth mentioning, John Mechie.
You love Mechie.
Well, Dell, you mentioned the stuff about Dell. Him and Diggs are out. They just cut Deontay Johnson.
Oh wow!
I mean, he was out there last week. It's just he caught a ball. He was out there. Robert Woods is questionable.
He got targets. He got one target.
He caught a pass and they let him go.
That's because he probably was like complaining about not getting enough targets.
Right. But Mechie, like at least from a player profile standpoint, is the closest thing they have to a Tank Dell. Now, I'm not comparing him to Tank Dell, but he's at least the guy that can break some big plays open. And Stroud looks for him. He's Stroud's, third read after Collins and Schultz, sometimes even second read. He had 8 targets last week. Just a guy that nobody's really going to play. And if you're playing Mahomes and maybe you're playing Mahomes and a couple of his pass catchers, it wouldn't hurt to run it back with someone from the Texans.
It's funny. You're like, I'm not comparing Mechie to Tank Dell. Mechie is just like this high-end Alabama football wide receiver who had an awesome year in college. But
so you could a little bit, right? Like they have similar profiles.
Yeah, it's just funny just saying that.
Tank Dell is just
Tank Dell kind of came out of nowhere, and he's been
good. Like what it could have been Mechie. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, just in terms of stats, his numbers just really haven't been as good. Just he's getting targets, but more possession, more close to the line. It seems like.
Yeah, it hasn't happened for him. He had one big game in a primetime spot, I remember, but
yeah, and you don't. I mean, I don't think his big game is going to come at Kansas City in the playoffs, but against this defense, who might be, I don't know, we got a few good defenses.
One of the best.
Yeah,
one of the best. They're one of the best.
So for tight end, we looked at a couple. This kind of might have been a 2 tight end slate. We mentioned all these sub 5K wide receivers. And it's kind of the similar situation. We have a lot of guys who we can like, who have potential. And then at the top of the list, only for 5K is playoff Travis Kelce. In what world are we fading playoff Travis Kelce at 5K?
Yeah, I mean, in a world where Sam Laporta is 4,200, but I hear
Is
you.
playoff Sam Laporta that good?
Yeah, I don't know. Is playoff Travis Kelce still that good?
I think
Like,
so. We just we base it off of last season's playoffs,
do
right?
they need him here? Like, I don't know. I don't know. Kelsey's a good play. Laporta's a good play. Lots of tight ends on this slate are good plays. I think it's going to be a 2 tight end slate for a lot of people again. The 2 game slates as well. This slate this slate too. I mean, there is enough value where you could maybe play for like a worthier Hollywood Brown in the flex in certain constructions. But the tight ends look pretty good, Adam. I agree. Kelce, like, why down to 5K? I mean, it just doesn't really make sense. I know he hasn't been as good, but he's coming off his best game in a while. 8 catches on 11 targets against the Steelers. Just doesn't really make sense that he's down there. The Ravens guys project well and look good with Zay Flowers out. Lamar loves throwing to the tight ends. They didn't need to throw last week, or one of those guys could have had a big game, but likely started out well. We've seen him be more of a focal point with Flowers out, or when they have guys banged up. So I like Ravens tight ends. Make arguments for a lot of these guys, though. I like Higbee and Schultz if you want to go all the way down, just for playing for teams that should be chasing.
Man,
like
Higbee was my guy, and then he went out with a chest contusion.
That was brutal, and he was nowhere near as popular as we were tilting that so hard. I thought he was going to be
58 in the first half.
I thought he was going to be like the chalkiest player, just like
there's too many, so he went overlooked.
Yeah, in the highest stakes stuff, he was only like 50%, and it was just that was brutal. That was unfortunate. But yeah, so 3,400 only. I mean, coughing up blood, spitting up blood. I don't know. Like, I guess we'll wait to hear, but I would kind of consider him 100%. Like, it's not a leg injury. And he's cheap. And it's a matchup where Stafford loves throwing to the tight ends, and they're going to be throwing a ton in this game, as long as they can get the ball. It's tough against the Eagles. Like, the Eagles are the team where they have 7-minute drives, 8-minute drives. They're running the ball every play. It's 3rd and 1, 4th and 1. The clock. I mean, so it's just brutal to play guys against the Eagles sometimes. But I still think, for 3,400, Higbee's okay. Schultz for 33 will be a little bit more popular. I think people just feel better about that. I don't know, Adam. There's about 7 or 8 guys you could consider. I didn't even mention Ertz, Goddard, Kincaid, all tournament plays. Like, we've seen Ertz have big games. It's a good spot for Ertz. I don't know. Are you playing Kelce? What are you going to do?
I think I got to play Kelce. Got to play him.
I think it's a spot where you're probably playing 2.
Got to play playoff. I pulled up his numbers from last year. His worst game was 10 targets, 71 yards. That was the first game, 26-7 win against the Dolphins. Didn't have a touchdown on that one. But he's now had basically 2 weeks off. Didn't play week 18 like a lot of these Chiefs did. Had the bye week. You could look at some of it like, okay, Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy now are on the team. Rashid Rice got 12, was getting 10-plus targets every game. Also, it seemed like they were running the ball more last season because Pacheco was basically a workhorse in the playoffs there. I mean, that could happen again, which, okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. But
they do have a few more weapons now. Like, last year it was Kelce and Rice.
There's definitely more weapons, but I mean, you look at it, didn't all these guys play against Pittsburgh? That was Hollywood Brown's first game. Kelce had 11 targets.
Yep. No, you're right. Kelce, I know he had a bunch of them on that last drive in the 4th quarter, and then that long touchdown, but still, that counts. It all counts. 5K, can't argue with that. I might have Kelce. I think you're playing 2 tight ends, though. I guess, what do you think of Kelce versus Worthy?
It's tough.
Kelce, yeah, it is tough. Worthy. I was looking at a lineup where I needed to decide between the 2.
I think I'd rather play Kelce.
It's a tough slate, man. There's just a lot of tough decisions. It's
He's
annoying when they make the pricing so soft
I just
because
like
it
him
just
more in the red zone row. That's
yeah. I like both of them actually. I like both
like
of them quite a bit
Worthy
because
gets the ball a ton in the red zone. Like seems like I see an end around with him in the red zone like every week, but I don't know.
they're
It's just Kelsey.
they're getting the ball to Worthy in more ways every single week.
Yeah.
They like I didn't the start of the season wasn't like that, but in the last few weeks he's looked more like a Rashee Rice even. Um, I think it's a good spot for both them because the Texans have two really good cornerbacks, one great cornerback, and those guys stay on the outside. And I think Kelsey and Worthy could have some success over the middle.
You're saying that's going to hurt Hollywood?
It could.
All right, good to know. Good to know. Yeah, my second favorite tight end. I think all these guys kind of fit in a role. You got, Laporte at 4,200 is ridiculous. It seems like it's just based off what he's done for the past couple months, he would be like a 6K tight
Ridiculous.
end. Yeah.
Yeah, ridiculous. 7+ targets in 5 straight, or 6+ in 8 straight, and he, as much or more so than St. Brown, he's like turning into a favorite red zone target of Goff's.
Mm-hmm.
He's just,
He's getting at
Jameson
least
isn't really that guy yet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Jameson's a long ball guy. He's
right. And Amon-Ra's a little smaller. I mean, we still see him getting some stuff around there, but yeah, Laporta just has so much touchdown upside. I think.
Yeah, I mean it's same for Kelsey. You
Yep.
sit in that role in the center kind of a thing. Yeah, I'd say probably behind those guys. Maybe I like Likely a little bit. Just getting more he'll get more targets without Zay, and this figures to be a different game than the one they played last week when it was 28-14. So if Lamar's throwing more, that means Likely should be getting more targets. And again, if you need the money, it's 3,500. You may not need the money because all these tight ends are kind of cheap, but probably my favorite of the cheap guys, just in terms of
I
matchup,
think
I
me
guess.
too. Yeah, I think me too. And I think the field will agree. I think Likely will end up coming in as the third highest owned tight end behind Kelsey and Laporta. And it makes sense.
Yeah. For defense, Chiefs 3,600. Are you willing to fade this Texans offense that led the playoffs in scoring last week?
For the 6-game slate, or sorry, for this 4-game slate, yeah, I would like to play the Chiefs, but I'm not making it a priority.
Okay.
I think defenses rarely should you prioritize defense and special teams.
I
The 2-game,
agree. I agree, but I know I said this last week. It feels like the Texans are most likely to score fewer than 10 points. I think
yeah,
I think I read or heard the Chiefs blitz the 5th highest rate in the league, and CJ Stroud
yeah,
has not been a good against the blitz this season. Also, again, Tank Dell isn't there. Stefan Diggs
no,
isn't there. So
you're right. On the on the 2-game slate, it's very difficult because you look at the totals and the Texans have like a 16-point total. Everyone else on the slate has the line's 32, 25, and 25. And like you said, the Chiefs defense is like one of the best in the NFL. Houston's offensive line is one of the worst in the NFL. So my point is, I'm trying to make lineups for this 2-game slate, and I make these great lineups that can't afford Chiefs D. But in the back of my mind is like, I mean, if Chiefs D outscores the other defenses by 10 points, you're going to be in trouble. So like on a 2-game slate, I was debating prioritizing it, but then you do that and you're like, this is defense. What are you doing? Like, it usually doesn't work to do that, especially if you're going to make a concession that you don't want to make somewhere else. But I agree. Like Chiefs defense looked pretty good here. They have me like strongly considering.
yeah, like similar to Kelsey, all these guys are rested. They're most likely to get 5+ sacks. And again, the Texans had, what did I say, 50 yards in 3 drives without Take Dell against them in the second half last time they played. Granted, a month ago, and Obviously, the Texans have been playing without Tank Dell, but I think it is still a relevant thing that like this Texans offense. They had a good successful second half against the Chargers, aided by 4 interceptions. But
Yeah. If anybody cares, the Chiefs played the Texans in Kansas City in Week 16, and Chiefs defense had 2 interceptions, 2 sacks, and scored 7 points. Now, if something like that happens, I would love to fade them. Something like that happens on Saturday, you would love to fade them. It'd be fine to play that 7 points in cash. Still might be the highest scoring defense, but you'd be fine fading them if they score 8, 9 points. I mean, it's still good for a defense, but you just worry about fading them and then putting up a big score. I don't know. Don't want to worry about it too much. They're the best defense for sure, but I'm not going to prioritize it. Like, you can go down to the Texans for $1,100 cheaper if you want. They crushed last week. They have a ton of good players, but yeah, I hate playing defenses against Mahomes. I don't know. Like, if I'm not going to play it, I have a little bit of interest in the Ravens. I don't know. Like, but do you want to play defense against Josh Allen? Sometimes it's okay. He throws interceptions if he's going for it. But yeah, I don't know. The Chiefs just look better than. Like, do you want to play the Lions defense against Daniels?
I didn't realize they only had 2 sacks against the Vikings that last time they played.
Yeah, like, they just don't get a ton of sacks without Aiden Hutchinson, and they allow a lot of points. Rams defense looked pretty good last week, 9 sacks, but that's against Darnold. Do you want to play them against Hurts? Like, we have all really good quarterbacks here. So if you want to play some of these other defenses, it's just not really good spots for any of them. So yeah, I think that the Chiefs will be the most popular and the Texans will be the second most popular. Just because, people will say, well, if we're not playing the Chiefs, let's just play like the cheapest viable defense. Not going to play the Commanders, so we can play the Texans. It's a lowish total game. They did well last week. They have a lot of good players, all pro corners, Will Anderson on the line. Like, I don't mind that. If you need the Texans, you can go down there.
Not to further this conversation, but if you don't want the Chiefs, I like the Eagles as well.
Yeah, me too. Good to bring up the Eagles. They've been great. And
if there's snow in that game,
yep,
and they're stacking the box against Kyron, like what
Stafford's a statue. He throws pick sixes. I mean, Stafford's been great, but he also throws pick sixes. So yeah,
is he a statue? I saw some Twitter fights going on. Maybe Orlovsky started him about him being a mobile quarterback.
You're right. I shouldn't say that. He's good at moving in the pocket, not being a mobile quarterback, but the same way, like,
he can move around.
He can move inside the pocket, like, completely different than Darnold. If Darnold had that's just so important.
Smarts.
He looks like Burrow, actually. Stafford was the original Burrow. Yeah, that's what he reminded me of. He was great against the Vikings last week.
The original Burrow.
Yeah, just so good in the pocket, and they can be elite without having the physical talents of the Lamars, the Josh Allens, the Hurts. Like, they got to do it with, like, smarts, moving around in the pocket, stepping up here.
Yeah, the original Peyton Manning, early. Tom Brady.
For sure. Yeah, Aaron Rodgers, those type of guys.
I mean, we're young. We could probably go back to, like, Dan Marino and go back
to
I
was just so impressed with Stafford last week. He was great. But also, yes, Eagles defense looks pretty good.
All right, this is supposed to be a 30-minute show. So how are we going to end the show? You got instead of, like, touting a bunch of Lions, is there what's your one sneaky play that's coming from the Sims builder?
Yeah, in tournaments, you got to take some chances. I mean, we talked about a bunch of Lions, talked about all the good plays here. That stuff's for cash games. For tournaments, trying to think of, like, something contrarian that I'm going to do. I think in lineups that I'm going to play Detroit, like if I'm going to play a Goff and Laporta or Goff and St. Brown stack, or even like Jameson Williams, I like using De'Ami Brown or even Zacchaeus, one of those cheaper pass catchers to run it back with. You get plenty of leverage there, and it'll let you spend up at other positions. I don't know, Adam. Another one of my takes is that I like Xavier Worthy on this slate. I guess it's hard to give takes on these 4-game slates. So part of it is deciding who the best plays are, right? Like all these guys are good plays. They all play for good teams. You have to make a decision who you're going to fade and who you're going to play. I think on another slate, like Xavier Worthy would be much more popular than he will be on this slate. But people are going to either go down to Hollywood, play Kelsey instead, play Shakir, get up to Puka, get up to McLaurin. So yeah, I don't know. I like Worthy here.
Yeah, I guess my general take is that I'd rather spend on running back than at wide receiver. That's just the way I'm going to build my lineup. I mean, you said some of these guys are going to be popular, like Amon-Ra and Puka, but I'm just not sure it's worth it when you got Henry, you got Barkley, you got Gibbs, all guys who, I'd say those guys are more likely to get 30 points than almost like Puka and St. Brown are to get 20 points. I mean, maybe a bit of a stretch, but
I like where your head's at because that's the way I'm leaning too. Two really good running backs, someone like Xavier Worthy to value to make up for it, tight ends. Yeah, I think we're on the same page.
Well, everyone calls me an NFL sharp, so it's good to hear that you're on the same side as me. But that's all we got for the divisional round. You can find Ryan's work, his articles. I don't know if his first one's up, but it will be at some point. He wrote up DraftKings articles for Saturday's 2-gamer and Sunday's 2-gamer. You can find him at Ryan Belongia. I'm at Zdroik. Check out rotowire.com. If you're interested in a 48-hour trial, rotowire.com/pod. That is POD. Good luck, everyone, on the slates, and we'll see what kind of content we have next week. We got 2-gamers. Depends how much Ryan wants to talk about it, write about it. There's only so much you can talk about when there's 2 games on a slate, but we'll see what happens. Thank you, Ryan, and good luck, everyone.
Thanks, Adam. Good luck, everybody.